Lots of eyes on the NBA Finals and lots of eyes on the upcoming NBA Draft. It's a few weeks away, so the guys who follow the prospects deep into the mock drafts and the rankings, here are the top 5 draft prospects over on CBSSports.com. You can go there for all the latest. An entire NBA draft section on the site, including mock drafts. All right, for more on these prospects and their comparison players, because we love to do comps here on CBS Sports HQ, let's bring in our NBA draft guys, 24/7 analyst Adam Finkelstein and CBS NBA writer Kyle Boone. Adam, let's start with a guy you call a virtual lock to be a top 5 pick, JADEN IVEY. What do you have as a comparison for him?
Well, I think Andrew Wiggins is really the best comparison, both in terms of their history to this point and also the attributes they bring to the NBA level. What you have with Wiggins is a guy who was the top prospect in the class. Shaedon Sharpe, exact same thing. An explosive athlete, vertically with the length to match. I think the other thing that's similar about them, maybe not quite as dynamic with their first step as we might expect for some. Andrew Wiggins is evolving as a shooter, and I think that Shaedon Sharpe is someone that is going to be able to do the exact same thing. JADEN IVEY, on the other hand, he's a guy that I like to compare to Steve Francis, a big power guard who gets downhill, can play with a certain burst in the open floor, has that size and physicality to go north to south with tremendous pop.
Yeah, and John Morant is the comparison that I have for JADEN IVEY, a guy who, coming out of college, John Morant was arguably the most explosive athlete in his draft class, and that was in a draft that included Zion Williamson, right? And so IVEY has an explosive first step. He's a guy who can really get downhill on you in a hurry. He doesn't have the same diversity in terms of his offensive skill set, his bag, as you would say. He doesn't have the same creation ability. He's not the same passer, right? But when you can just run by guys with the ball in your hands, that is an absolute advantage. JADEN IVEY can absolutely do that. We saw that time and again. He's able to pressure the rim from anywhere on the court. We do want to see kind of JADEN IVEY evolve and develop as a playmaker. I think his passing is where he can improve the most. But if you're projecting a few years down the road what JADEN IVEY can be, I think he can be a true starting lead guard in the NBA if his playmaking can really develop and he can kind of cut down on some of those mistakes. That's why he's number 1 on the CBS Sports big board. I think long-term has as high a ceiling as any prospect in this year's draft class.
Steve Francis and John Morant, not bad comparisons for the number 1 pick, as you mentioned, Kyle. The number one guy that we have is in terms of the prospects over on CBSSports.com. So depending on who you talk to, CHET HOLMGREN, a lot of people think he's the best prospect in this draft. Or is he? I mean, both of you guys agree on your comparison here. So, Kyle, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on this player comp for HOLMGREN? Well,
Kristaps Porzingis is the comp just basically because they have the same frame, right? Kristaps Porzingis, a guy who was a 7-footer, coming to the NBA. He's the same size. Both pretty slim in terms of body and frame. CHET HOLMGREN has been kind of ripped because he's 7 foot tall, but he's less than 200 pounds. Both can space the floor. I think both can defend the rim at a high level. Porzingis, we saw when he first arrived in the NBA, his best offense early on was just on cleaning up around the boards. The putbacks, dunks, lobs. He was kind of really rough in transition, and that has mostly borne out throughout his NBA career. CHET, meanwhile, is already really good in both aspects as kind of a spot-up shooter. He can run the transition. He's really good in that aspect of his game. I think he is a way better defender than Kristaps Porzingis ever has been, just because of his timing on his blocks when he's kind of defending the rim, and also he can kind of step out and defend the perimeter as well. So the polish that CHET HOLMGREN has already shown at Gonzaga, and I think will show over the next few years as he continues to develop, is a better version of Kristaps Porzingis. And if you're getting a better version of Kristaps Porzingis, that's a guy I want to take with the top 5 pick.
Both Kyle and Adam agreeing on the player comp for HOLMGREN being Kristaps Porzingis. So let's go to Paulo Banchero. Took his team to the Final Four, but isn't getting near the traction that many think he probably should be getting. Most mocks have him in the top 3 at 3. So, Adam, when it comes to a player comp for him, who's the closest player?
Well, he is almost a carbon copy of Michael Beasley when Michael Beasley was coming out of Texas. Now, obviously, Beasley didn't live up to all the expectations we had at that time. I do think Paolo will, but just in terms of someone who has that size, that strength, with the agility, though, to make plays. Paolo, 6'9", 6'10", 250 pounds. You can see the physical dominance that Beasley showed, not just at the college level, but in the NBA level as well. And again, this isn't to say that I really do believe that Paolo is going to have a better NBA career than Michael Beasley, but I think people forget the upside that Beasley showed coming into the NBA game. It's very similar to what we see from Paolo, and I expect Paolo to really maximize his upside.
Yeah, I like that comp, Adam. And my comp for Paolo Banchero is Ben Simmons, a guy who is kind of bizarro Ben Simmons in a lot of ways, right? Ben Simmons, at least in the NBA, has been an elite defensive prospect who's really good at passing. Paolo Banchero is quite the opposite because he is an elite offensive prospect, really good at passing, but the defense, I think, is maybe one of the biggest question marks as he goes into the NBA. Banchero is really, really polished just in terms of his all-around offensive game. I think the defense is obviously the biggest question mark. Similar in size, similar in that they both can grab boards and run the break. You know, Paolo Banchero, growing up, was essentially a point guard, a guy who had the ball in his hands a lot. He grew just before high school and still maintains some of that guard skill set. So his passing, his playmaking, I think, is going to be an asset for him in the NBA. We've already seen that skill set translated for Ben Simmons from LSU to the NBA level. And in that way, that comp reminds me a little bit, Paolo Banchero and Ben Simmons.
Beasley and Simmons, the comps for Banchero. All right, Jabari Smith Jr. has been on a rocket ship to stardom over the past year. Now he's being touted as a possible top pick in the draft, the top pick overall. Kyle, who does he remind you of?
Yeah, he's not Kevin Durant, JSL. I would just say that now, but he has some similarities to Kevin Durant just because a guy who's 6'10", who is a dead-eye shooter, guys like this just don't come around very often. The positional shooting that he brings to the table at his size is really just unique. He shot 42% from the three-point line last season as a true freshman at Auburn. Jabari can't make the same variety of shots that Kevin Durant makes in the NBA and really didn't even make at the college level with Texas. Doesn't have nearly the same handles, but Jabari, at least as a spot-up shooter, someone who's a real catch-and-shoot threat, is reminiscent of Kevin Durant. He rated in the 94th percentile as a true freshman last season in spot-up shooting, and he joined Kevin Durant in becoming the second freshman in college hoops ever who was at least 6'10" or taller to make at least 70 threes and 100 free throws. So he obviously has some areas of his game to develop. I'd love to see his handle improve a little bit, his playmaking and his shot making become a little bit more diversified. But you know, there's a reason we're talking about Jabari Smith as the potential #1 prospect in this class. He has star potential and someone who is an elite shot maker at 6'10".
Yeah, you know, Kyle, I really like the Rashard Lewis comp. I know I'm going back a little bit, but again, another perimeter forward, 6'10", who could really shoot the ball from the perimeter, kind of could play either the 3 or the 4 spot like Jabari is. I think Jabari is a more versatile defender than Rashard Lewis, but we're talking about somebody who can really stretch the floor, who can pick and pop. You see that high release that Rashard Lewis has. That is very much the same release that we see from Jabari, the ability to operate in the mid-post, again, very reminiscent. My big question with Jabari is how he impacts the game in the paint. Does he get to the rim enough? Does he rebound enough? And those were concerns for Lewis as well.
All right, last but certainly not least, I know, Adam, you've already talked a little bit about Shaedon Sharpe.
Yeah, I was dying to get to this. Yeah.
But let's get into Shaedon Sharpe. I mean, the player comp for you, just kind of walk us through. You both agree on the player comparison here, so that's why, Adam, I'm just going to you here. Give us the player comparison again for Sharpe and kind of walk us through your thinking here.
Yeah, so again, it's Andrew Wiggins, similar path, similar game, former top-ranked high school prospect in the country, elite vertical athlete, great frame, potentially not quite as athletic in terms of his first step and advantage creation ability, with playmaking and creativity off the bounce, but you see his ability to really rise up, be a lob threat, dynamic in the open floor. And this is the area of his game that I think is really going to blossom at the next level, just like we've seen from Andrew Wiggins in terms of the shooting potential, both off the catch and the dribble. I think Shaedon is going to end up being a little bit better of a shooter than Andrew Wiggins is, but I think that comp is a very, very strong one.
They are our NBA draft guys, Adam Finkelstein and Kyle Boone. Adam has his prospect profiles up on 24/7 Sports. You can read Kyle's latest over on CBSSports.com. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's take a look at some of the key dates to come. The NBA draft, of course, June 23rd. That's what we've been talking about. Free agency beginning on July 1st. Then training camps in September. TBA.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.